All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through the presentation. Um, and at any time, like ask questions, give me ideas. I'm open to ideas, things that you're doing in your district as well. So,
Mhm.
and where are you located, Morgan?
Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, welcome from Austin. I bet it is nice and warm.
Quite muggy right now, actually. Very humid.
Yeah, it has warmed up here in North Carolina as well. So we're looking at the global communicator standards for ISTE, and um, what I my questions were: what is one word or phrase that comes to mind when you hear global connection, or what's one way your students currently connect beyond your classroom?
Hmm. Um,
Yeah, Dave said TikTok.
yeah.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So any type of social media, they're
Yeah, I mean,
great
it's
at the
amazing
face
how
to
they
face.
will just talk across to people from anywhere. If I was talking to my friend in wherever,
One thing that I thought about here was in gaming, that they actually connect with others through their gaming platforms as well. So, which can be scary. And Morgan, the link to the presentation for today is in the chat, and it's on the screen as well. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to break down each of the standards. This is our team. You see Dave is on with me. He's the Director of Digital Platforms and Pedagogy here in Johnston County. I'm Michelle McNeil. I'm the Executive Director of Instructional Technology. We have Kay Minjavar, who is our Digital Learning and Media Specialist. And then our office support is Denise Blanchard, and we couldn't do it without her. So she is wonderful. And then our goals are just unpacking those standards, designing learning experiences that connect students with diverse perspectives using digital tools. Um, we want to look at the how to structure effective digital project teams by implementing clear roles and responsibilities. And then we want to integrate the local and global issues into our collaborative inquiry. So, so we're going to start and unpack the standards one by one. The biggest, I feel like the heaviest lift is that global connections, because I feel like that's the part that ties into all of the other indicators within this ISTE standard. So in the presentation, there is the ISTE standard in action video for each indicator of that standard. I'm not going to play that for you, but if you're interested in it, they're like a minute long, maybe 2 minutes tops. Um, and they're most of them are good at kind of showing that ISTE standard in action. This one I think was like an elementary level, so it also depends on what level you're at as well. All right, so for global connections, let's look at what the ISTE like definition of that is, or the breakdown. Whoops, of that. Students will use digital tools to connect with peers from a variety of backgrounds, recognizing diverse viewpoints and broadening mutual understanding. So, what that looks like in action is students engaging in authentic communication, not simulated communications. The interaction would include questioning, sharing, and reflecting. Your students would compare perspectives, but they would also recognize bias. And then using those synchronous and asynchronous tools in order to engage in that communication. So what it is not is watching a video about another culture, which is the easiest way. You know, that's the way that oh, you want to know about other cultures? Well, here's a video. And that's great, but that is not what this is. So it is also not pen pals with no academic connection. It is not a one-time guest speaker with no follow-up. And it's also not global as just a topic and not interaction. So I'm going to give you some examples across content areas. I use North Carolina standards to develop this, but you could definitely translate it to your Texas standards as well, or if you use Common Core, which most states use Common Core. North Carolina just decided to be different. So, so a K2 standard, talking about our weather today, a class could actually, they could design a slide or in Canva or Adobe, design something that shows the weather today in their area. They could also correspond with another class, whether it's in the same school or district, and find out if the weather is the same or different in that area. And I can think of here, there are times when the weather is not different. I mean, not the same from one part of our district to another. But even, one class to another. But you could even talk about the weather, like we just came back from spring break. Where they went on spring break, whether they stayed at home or they went on vacation, what was the weather like, and have them design a slide about the weather in the area that they were at and talk about whether that weather was the same or different than where other students went. For 3 through 5, thinking about reading a story, what lesson did you learn from the story? And then students commenting on those peer responses to what they learned from the story. Again, it can be the class, it can be multiple classes, or it can be classes outside of, your school or district. Social Studies 6-8, comparing daily life in different regions. How is your life similar and how is it different? So I think, Texas is much larger than North Carolina, but I think that you guys kind of have the same effect that we have. Like from one part of our state to another, the regions are extremely different. We have our coastal region, then we have our mountain region, and in between we've got the sand hills. We also have a couple of islands, that one of which is pretty remote island that is part of a school district that only has 2 schools, but the 2 schools are 2 hours apart by ferry. So even thinking about that, when you're thinking about your state, being able to look at how things are different across your state in different regions, and being able to connect with students who would be able to tell about life in their region and how it might be different. And then for high school, I looked at science and thinking about those environmental issues and how they impact their area, and being able to respond to another class's perspective on that. So we use Discovery Education a lot. Do you have access to Discovery Ed in your district?
Not anymore.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. what about Britannica?
Yes, that we do.
Okay, so they could use Britannica if they're able to use like PBS learning and things like that. We also have access to ClickView or Streamable Learning, which have videos in them. So they could bring in those third perspectives using research tools or videos such as that and asking, how does this compare globally? So those are just a few ideas. So the 4 levels of global connection that we're going to talk about. So level 1, your floor level would be global without leaving your classroom. That's going to be the easiest one. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in just a minute. And then level 2 would be cross class. Using different classes within your school or within your district. Level 3 would be the asynchronous global connections. And then your highest level would be live global collaboration. That is the hardest one to do. But we will talk about some ideas around that as well. So global without leaving your classroom looks like you don't need a teacher partner. Within your, a classroom within your school building or your district probably has multiple perspectives in that classroom, whether it's based on origin, culture, or just your lived experiences that create those perspectives as well. I know we have a lot of multicultural classrooms, so you could do this within just a classroom without having to connect outside. And the focus for this is on exposure, reflection on different and diverse viewpoints. So we could use Discovery Education, Britannica, EBSCO. We can use the Teach SDGs and the world's largest lesson. Are you familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes.
Okay. So I won't go, I have some resources on them, but I won't, give you the definition of it since you are familiar. So one of the things we looked at, an example would be understanding weather patterns and factors that affect climate. Students could watch a video on weather in different regions and then talk about how that weather is different from the weather in their own region. How might it affect how people live? I was thinking about Florida because ISTE is going to be in Florida, Orlando, and I've been doing some work around different technology in that area of Florida. And one of the things I've come across is the mosquito control. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But in the work doing in ISTE, I've realized that even their building structure has to be different because of where they're located and the amount of, the impact from hurricanes and weather and salt air, because, the state is pretty much basically wetland and marshland makes up most of Florida. So, how they build has to be different because of the weather. So thinking about that and how that weather might affect the way that people live, and then students just being able to create a slide or a presentation to compare their weather to the weather in another region. So then you've got your cross-class connections. that's doesn't really have a lot of logistical barriers, because that you could work with people in your own building. Or if you wanted to get outside of your building, maybe, a singleton. We had a music teacher in our last session. She may want to reach other music teachers within the district, but they could partner with another teacher. So the logistical barriers aren't high here, but you still have those different backgrounds existing. You might have, different cultures, different experiences due to different neighborhoods or urban versus rural, or even grade levels. So students can share their thinking and respond to peers using those digital spaces like Google Slides, Google Vids, Canva, Adobe Express. Kay, who was on here earlier today, talked about the podcasting within Adobe Express and how wonderful that would be for things like this as well. So an example I have here is 2 classes reading the same story, and then the prompt would be, what lesson did you learn from this story, and how does it connect to your life? And I thought, when you add that second question, it really kind of is a game changer. What lesson did you learn from this story? A lot of kids are going to get the same lesson that they learned because the author usually has a specific lesson. But when you ask how it connects to your life, then you start getting those deeper viewpoints and perspectives. So the students could create their slides. They can, things like, had a similar experience when. That's different from mine because, I've never done this before, but things like that. So you start getting into those different perspectives, and it could be 2 classes within the same school that are just connecting with one story or one lesson or one book. So the next level would be that asynchronous global connections. That one, you're not going to have the scheduling and time zone stresses, because you're going to do this basically, you share it and then they can respond when they have a chance to respond. So connect to that class anywhere, share their work and respond. Let's say, this week we're going to connect with a class in North Carolina, and they're going to respond to this question, and we're going to check back on it and see. So you could have your Google tools in which allow the collaboration. You could also use Canva or Adobe Express, Padlet. So there's lots of different tools that could be used in order to share that asynchronously. And then, using your Teach SDG resources to come up with some ideas. So you could find some partners through your social media channels. The ISTE community forum, I'm assuming you're part of that. Okay. I'm assuming you're part of that, or you wouldn't be here today probably. So, and then you've got your Teach SDGs community to where you can connect with other educators. So this one, we talked about how does geography influence daily life in your community, and we kind of talked about the island here, that it's literally, the island is 12 miles long, but the occupied part of the island is about a mile square. It's like a 1 mile square mile, I guess you'd call it, or I don't know that that's the correct term, but that's it. and the rest of it is unoccupied. So, thinking about the climate and the land features and how do people live and work in different areas, or we have the mountain region, what's different for them. I have a friend who is in a district office position who drives a bus in the snow. And we're like, no, we're not in the snow. No, I'm not driving a bus anyway, and I'm not doing it in the snow. So, those are some things that he has to do as part of his work life. And so thinking about how their environments are different and how that changes how people live based on where they live. So the highest level would be live global collaboration. And that one does have a lot more logistical barriers because you're talking about your time zones and scheduling and permissions. You can use the live Google Meets or Zooms or team meetings with another class. Suggested to use it as a culminating or a high impact experience. Google Meet, so if they're in Johnston County, they could initiate the meeting with a Google Meet, but they can accept or join through Zoom or Microsoft Teams. What do you guys use in your district?
Primarily Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. So you could initiate a Zoom meeting or join otherwise. And then I suggest using some type of collaborative notes. We would use probably Google Docs. So what that could look like is students connecting live with another class and talking about like how human activities impact the ecosystems in their areas. And they could prepare some questions ahead of time in the Google Doc and then have that discussion during their Google Meet. And then afterwards, they could create an Adobe or Canva presentation to compare those local versus global impacts and some possible solutions to those impacts. So how would teachers actually find a partner? One I suggest is to start small and just like, I'm going to try one connection this semester. They can ask in their ISTE communities, their social media communities. I also suggest asking their existing international teachers or contacts. And do y'all use, like, I think they're called differently in different places, but do y'all have the international teachers that
yes.
Okay, that come and they're contracted for like so many years. So we did that in one school I was in. The teacher actually connected with another teacher in her home of Jamaica, and the students got to have it was a late afternoon Zoom meeting for our side, and I feel like it was an early morning or like something like that for Jamaica, but I don't know the time difference. But I think it was something like that where they connected with them and talked about some different areas of, like impacts and global issues. So keep it simple. The first collaboration, one question, one tool, one response, just make it manageable for you and for your students. So a pro tip in your school, ask your school or district ESL teachers, and I'm assuming y'all use the same acronyms. We love acronyms, don't we? Your world language teachers, and then again, staff with international connections, because they might already have a class that you could partner with. And then I included a template that you could copy and paste and put on your social media platform, just asking to connect with another class on a specific topic, or, given the grade level, the location, and then the topic. And even easier, you can do a no partner needed hack where you just use simulated global voices. So, students would look for those different perspectives from news articles, videos, or informational sources, and then respond to, like, how would this person respond? Any questions on that standard? Any thoughts or ideas on that standard?
The last slide made me, so we started piloting Magic School this year, which has a chatbot option. I don't know if that would really work for this, or, in an authentic way. I mean, I guess it's at last resort. They could be, yeah.
Simulation.
Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
And simulation is a way to like ramp up to it. I think the ultimate goal with these is, our dream is to connect with other things. It's just hard. But as you were talking, I had a moment. I don't know if you saw my face. I didn't fix it. I was just thinking, in the EduGuardian chat, there's people from all over the world. I had never thought of that. But Eileen's in Scotland. There's that girl in Greece. There's a ton of them in Canada. And the EduGuardian meetups, you get put in breakout rooms with them all the time. Just, hey, I'm in Canada. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a place that can leverage that.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's a great idea. And so many people are willing to do that. I was telling them in an earlier session today, even in my first years teaching, like, I was a CTE business teacher, and I wanted to connect with others, either across the district or across the state, or I would have loved to have connected with someone in California, and, just to allow my students to see those different perspectives. And that was before I knew anything about ISTE. So, but the logistics can be the hard part. All right, so we're going to go into the multiple viewpoints, and what that looks like. That looks like students using collaborative technologies to work with others, including peers, experts, community members, to examine the issues and problems from multiple viewpoints. Now, I think I've said it several times, multiple perspectives, multiple viewpoints, and that is one of the keys here. Oh, there we go. I was on the wrong tab. It was giving me a fit. So what this would look like: students analyzing bias and credibility, engaging in structured discussion, not just opinion discussions, using tools to compare perspectives side by side, incorporate peer, expert, and community voices. So even when you're talking about like using Magic School, students could analyze the output of that chatbot, and look for bias, and look for multiple viewpoints. You can leverage the AI tools in order to do that, like you were talking about. So what this does not look like is pick a side debates. We want to definitely add in that research part of it. It also is not using only one source. It's not the teacher telling both sides of the story, nor is it surface level agreement. So a couple of examples I have would be reading two versions of a story. I can think of the Cinderella story has like the one we normally hear, and then I think that there's the I want to say the Chinese Cinderella.
Dozens of them, No Face Girl, and versions of Cinderella.
Like there's lots of different cultural renderings of Cinderella where students could read those different versions of the story and talk about what's different in them. We were talking about community roles and looking at something from the perspective of community roles. When we think about AI, if we look at AI from the perspective of the student versus the teacher versus a community member, the perspectives change. So you could ask a question about AI use, like what's your number one concern surrounding students using AI in school? And these three perspectives, students could research that and find three different perspectives. Not just talking about it and not just debating on it with no research. There's research that has the perspective, especially of students and teachers surrounding AI use. But then your community members, I think of your business owners, there's research on, what businesses are saying. Your environmental issues. This was the one that I was talking about. I was thinking about the mosquito control in Florida from the scientist's perspective versus me as a community member perspective. The lady that I connected with at the mosquito control, the Lee County mosquito control, just the information that she gave me on, like, they don't use pesticides, but they have to have mosquito control because if they didn't, you couldn't live in Florida because of the nature of the environment there. One, the disease would be so high, and two, the mosquitoes would take over. So then the science perspective on how do you treat them without using pesticides? What are safe ways to control the mosquito population? And it was just amazing to me, the different things that they are using when it comes to that. And if you're at ISTE, come see me. I'm going to tell more about it in my session. But anyway, it's just amazing. I was like, I never thought I would be so excited to learn about mosquitoes and mosquito control, but it is really interesting. And the technology that they're using in order to, to find mosquitoes, to how they go about treating the population or controlling the population it's just amazing to me. And then you've got, your high school, it can be English language arts or civics as well, identifying bias, audience, and perspective. We went to a session here and it was called Wicked Literacy. And basically it was talking about the different perspectives of Glinda, the Wicked Witch, and the Wizard of Oz, and then kind of made some news articles, and the students had to look at that and look for bias in the articles, look for, who was the audience they were trying to cater to, what perspective were they looking at this from. And then to enhance that, you can even look at what perspective is missing. You can look at two different news articles on the same topic from two different news agencies and look at the same things there, the bias, the audience, the perspective, and even what's missing in that. So this is the one I feel like we get wrong more often than not, is project teams. At least here, I feel like I got it wrong a lot because what project teams are is students contributing constructively to a project team, assuming various roles, responsibilities to work effectively toward a common goal. It looks like clear roles. You have the role of, and not necessarily letting them choose roles. Using those shared tools, students self-managing and reflecting. And this is the key part, visible contribution from all members. So what that is not is one student doing all the work. We've seen those group projects. Yeah, they're great. And that one student did all the work. So it is not that, and it is not group work without structure. It is not no accountability or roles. And it's not the teacher micromanaging everything. That can be difficult for us teachers most of the time. So that could look like, a student doing a group doing a STEM project where they're building a bridge, but you give each student a specific role for, you are the drawer, you are the speaker, you are the materials handler, or whatever. Group story writing, they could use a collaborative document, and one could be a writer, one could be an editor, one could be an illustrator. I even can think of where you could do, you craft the first paragraph, and then the next student has to add the next paragraph, and it has to flow. And then, they craft a story, but each one has a specific part in that story. Creating an infographic or a timeline, and each student being responsible for a specific section. If that section's not there, the individual who was responsible is the one that's held liable. And then your 9-12 students, teaching them to track using progress trackers or project trackers, assigning the roles, tracking contributions, reflecting on teamwork, and just maybe even using a daily contribution log or using version history for accountability. Okay, so I am almost out of time, so I'm going to go over the global collaborator, local and global issues. And this is where I would pull in my SDG resources, but students exploring local and global issues and using the collaborative technologies to work with other students to investigate. That would be them using exploring authentic problems, connecting local and global impact, using those research and collaboration tools, and creating solutions or action plans. So definitely not just researching a problem with no action or solution. The teacher telling them this is the problem and here's how we're going to solve it. And it's not really a one-day activity. This would be more your ongoing things, like your K-2 students having a recycling project where they create posters and encourage the community to recycle, or they do a recycling drive. Your 3-5 students can look at different community needs, which, those change as you go. If you've been through a hurricane, your need right at that time may be different than what it is, at a different time. When Texas got hit by the ice storm, your community need was different during that time. and connecting those students to those needs, as well as comparing them to other regions as well. Your 6-8 students could do a water conservation drive where, they create some infographics around how to conserve water. And then, using those Teach SDG tools, identifying the issues, researching using your EBSCO or Britannica, and creating those solutions. So to enhance that, I would suggest using the world's largest lesson and adding what can we do locally. So this is the one I wanted to introduce you to. It's the Design Thinking and SDG Toolkit. Let's see. All right. This, another colleague and I presented at, I believe it was a conference here in the state, but she basically put everything together, exploring the SDGs, design thinking toolkit, some mini design challenges, and then some ed tech tools. But in the links to explore, there are a lot of different things around the SDGs, curriculum resources to go along with teaching the sustainable development goals, as well. So lots of resources there. I'm going to switch back over. And then we also have some other resources here on empowering digital global learners in some ways. These are North Carolina based, but it's look for how to have that global classroom. And then if you're interested in learning more from us, we have our digital learning YouTube channel. And we also, our information is on this last slide here. You're welcome to email us. We will send out, we have a summer learning series that we did last year, and you may have joined, you may not have, I'm not sure, but it's called Grounds for Growth. And we're going to do that again this year. We haven't pinned down our topics yet. I feel like they may be around AI, but I'm not 100% positive. Last year, they were just random. Like we had Canva, we had Adobe, we might have had Brisk. So we haven't pinned down our topics, but once we do, I will send that out to everyone who's registered for these sessions as well. And if you would like to provide feedback, you can take our little survey. We would love to have your impact or input on what we can do better or differently, or how you could use this learning. And I'd love to hear how you're using that learning as well. So that is all I have. Do you have any questions for us?
Not offhand. This is a lot to dig into. I'm pretty new in this job. Until recently, I was a school librarian, so it's very similar, but also just a mindset change in a lot of ways. So, just trying to learn right now, and yeah.
So,
well, bless you, because district level librarians have a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
And you said, so are you district level librarian or district level instructional tech facilitator?
I was a school like individual campus, and now I work at the district level.
Okay. At the district level, what exactly? Okay. What sort of do you do?
We're still kind of figuring that out. It's a new position, and a lot of it is managing our Canvas rollout that we're working on for the district, the LMS, but otherwise it's just kind of getting our educational technology practices together, just sort of delivering PDF course and developing policies and I don't know, just creating a more focused, deliberate approach to how we use EdTech.
Got you. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording real quick, maybe. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop that.